Hi there, and welcome to the Jane Anderson Show. Thank you for joining me today. Our guest today is a globally recognized workplace expert. She's an award winning author and trusted advisor who helps leaders and teams elevate their influence to navigate complexity, in particular with confidence. She has over 30 years' experience in senior executive roles and advisory work, and she understands how organizations operate and how real progress happens. She's the author of Step Up, Career Leap, and Bad Boss, and regularly contributes to national media and leadership forums. She's known for her pragmatic wisdom and insight led approach. She empowers leaders to make intentional choices that serve their people, purpose, and progress. She loves a good conversation in her spare time. She travels, reads, and she's always up for an adventure. Please welcome the one and only Dr. Michelle Gibbings. Dr. Michelle Gibbings, fantastic to have you on board today. Thank you so much for your time. You are one incredibly, and I'm not going to say busy, I'm going to say productive and in demand expert in your field. We're so lucky to get you at the moment. And thank you for jumping on board today and joining us.
My absolute pleasure. I love your energy. It's infectious. So thank you. It's my absolute pleasure.
Michelle, as you know, we have this podcast is all about helping women to be able to build their practices, thought leadership practices, particularly selling B2B. You have built an extraordinary practice, and you and I go a long way back. I think back when I don't know if we started around similar time, but I remember back to your first book. I remember walking through Melbourne Airport and seeing these incredible billboards, and I'm going, "Oh my God, look at this woman! She's so famous." And I'm this person who kind of knows her. That's incredible. Can you tell us a bit about your journey for those who are going, how? Because I think sometimes people think these things all magically happen, but there's been a journey that's for you starting your practice. Are you happy to sort of go into a bit of your history and into how that sort of got you to today?
Absolutely. So, I've been in business for almost 12 years,
Mm.
and it's interesting because I look at my career and I've always seen my career as a bit of an adventure. I love learning, I love being challenged, and even what I do now, that has never changed. And
Yeah.
so I was never one to have this sort of firm career plan. But I was always looking for where could I learn, where could I grow, and I was willing to do things that were different and that were challenging. And I remember at one point one of my girlfriends saying to me, and this is when I was in corporate, she said, "Michelle, your career terrifies me." And I said, "Why?" She goes, "You make these seemingly random jumps into roles that you know nothing about." And
Right.
I had had a very unusual corporate career. So I had gone from everything from being a company spokesperson to running large scale change programs to being a head of compliance to being a chief of staff. So I had jumped functional disciplines. And there was a common basis, though, to all of that. And a lot of it was this ability to understand a complex environment, navigate that environment, and influence outcomes.
Right.
And so, yes, there was, technical skills I was learning along the way, but I also found that as you moved up into more senior roles, those technical skills became less important. And what became way more important were all of those, notional soft skills, which I think is
Right.
such a misnomer. But all
Yes.
of that ability to be able to influence, strategize, work in a complex system.
Right.
um, and then my last corporate gig was not fun, and I orchestrated an exit, but it really was just not a good environment. And I
Right.
went on a meditation retreat, and I came back from the meditation retreat, and I said to my husband, "I'm done. I'm done." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Done with what?" And I said, "Not done with you, but done with corporate." And he goes, "Oh, okay. What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to open a business." He goes, "In what?" I said, "I've got absolutely no idea." And it sounds kind of like a joke when I say it, but that was the conversation. And I then sat
Wow.
back and went, "Okay, so what am I good at? What do I want to do?" And that was really, there was a lot of soul searching in that, a lot of experimentation. And then towards the end of that sort of first 4 to 5 months, I ran into a former colleague of mine from work, and he talked to me about thought leaders, which is where I
Right.
then met you. And that
Yes.
was really sort of pivotal in that I mean, this sounds so naive when I say this, but I was like, I didn't realize I needed product. I just thought I told people that I was running a
Right.
business. And so there was just this naivety, but a curiosity at the same time and a willingness to learn. And so Thought Leaders was really helpful because it gave me structure. It gave
Right.
me a process to use and it gave me structure. And then from there, it was always this sense of, okay, so what do I need to do? What's next? Do that. What's next? And, being in business now for 12 years, I've done, there's been 3 books, there's been chapters in books for Harvard, I did the
Yes.
PhD. And a lot of that was personal achievement and pushing myself, but that also grew the business. And I look at what I do now, and I think even from the get go, I've been really um, privileged in the sense that I genuinely enjoy what I do, but that
Mm.
doesn't mean that it's been easy. I remember in my first year of running a business, I said to Craig, "Woo! I just made what I made out of my first year out of university." So, I'd gone from, an executive salary to, a massive drop in
Right.
salary, but that was a conscious choice. And so I've
Yes.
always, as I've been growing the business, it's, everything's a trade-off. If I do this, I can't do that. If I do more of this, I do less of that. So there's
Right.
been a deliberate strategy as I've gone through this, but an openness to experiment. And there's been things that I've tried that haven't worked, and I've gone, that's been interesting. Won't do that again. What have I learned? What am I taking forward?
Wow, that's incredible. And because it takes a lot of courage and trusting yourself and your own self belief, even at a time of uncertain, like that's incredible uncertainty to go, I don't even know what this is going to be, but I'm going to go with it. And, that's, you talk a lot about Craig, your husband, Craig. He's obviously an amazing support to you. And even at the time where he said, "No, I'm not getting rid of you. You're safe." But what role do you, and we don't talk a lot about our partner's husband, the other people around us. What sort of role has he had he's obviously a big supporter of yours. How important has that been for you?
Absolutely critical. I mean,
Right.
even when I was doing the exit out of the role in corporate, so
Mm.
we had moved from Melbourne to Sydney for this big corporate role. 8
Oh,
months
wow.
later,
Okay.
I'm, in tears at home going, this is just, and Craig said to me, that place is destroying you. He goes,
Yeah.
I have never seen you doubt yourself so much.
Right.
And he was really, he was just, "We don't need this." Like, and I'm like, "But we've moved to Sydney." He goes, "Doesn't
Right.
matter. We
Yeah.
can move back to Melbourne. I can move back to Melbourne with work." We were very fortunate in that he hadn't changed his role. He had just changed jurisdictions
Oh,
in terms
okay.
when we moved to Sydney, his role stayed the same. Um, and the whole way through, he's just been, "Yeah, go for it. I trust you.
Right.
You can do this." And there's been occasions he's a good sounding board as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I often joke because my husband works in IT, so I've often joked that he's my IT support, and there will be occasions where he'll go on a Sunday, "Michelle, help desk is shut. Help desk is not working at the moment, we're done." But I think it would be very running a business, and you would know this, running a business can be lonely. And
Mm,
if you don't have someone who you trust implicitly,
mm,
who one is willing just to listen to you, rant when you need to occasionally rant, but also
yeah.
problem solve. So he's
Right.
very good at listening to me and then giving other ideas and going,
Right.
have you thought about that? Or have you thought about this? And also the partnership in that when you are starting a business, you are sacrificing things. So in that, particularly in
Yeah.
that first couple of years, we weren't earning what we were earning when I was in corporate. And
Right.
so there was an adjustment in terms of, okay, what does that mean in terms of lifestyle, choices that we're making? But we always knew that this was an investment for the longer term in terms of this was the sort of the new chapter of my career that I would do until I decide that I never want to work, because the
Right.
brilliance of what I do, I can dial it up, I can dial
Yeah.
it down. If I want to work
Yeah.
3 days a week, I can work 3 days a week. I want to do one. If I want to do five, I can do five. And
Okay.
so the ability to be able to take this into my 60s, if I wanted to keep working into my 70s, not sure about that, but if I wanted to, I could. So it gives an enormous amount of flexibility. So
Mm.
I often say to people who I see when they're thinking about setting up a business, one, it is the planning to do it. I was fortunate that also because, from a financial perspective, I'm financially astute and savvy. I had
Yes.
made good choices that then meant that we had a buffer, that to be able to do this,
Right.
we were okay. Whereas I do see some people when they start a business, it's really hard
Yeah.
because they don't have that financial buffer. And so I'm not
Yeah.
saying don't start a business if you don't have a financial buffer. But if you're thinking about it in those last couple of years of corporate or whatever you're doing, if you can save something to have some buffer, it just gives you some breathing space.
Yes, it's such great advice because, often people will say things like, "Oh, I just want to replace my income in my job," and but the revenue you've got to generate to replace that is quite different to just being able to go, "Oh yeah, like I'll just invoice on that." But you've got tax, you've got super, you've got your running costs, all those, you've got VAs and subscriptions and all these things that that chews up pretty quickly. So we can underestimate um, what we actually need, and
Yeah.
opposed to there are those things to include. But Craig, is such a great support for you, and you always smile. I always see you smile when we mention his name. So a shout out to all those partners, husbands, the family team, around us that make all these things and help you to shine. I think you're such a great example of a great team. Even though, like you said, he's IT support. Sometimes he's not online, but you are a great example of it. I think a couple who are obviously incredibly supportive of each other, and that has a big role, I think, in success when people, because often a lot of women say to me, my partner, husband doesn't agree or doesn't support me or doesn't. It's one thing to not understand necessarily, but it's a very different thing to not be very supportive. So it's great to hear that you've been able to do that. And I know you talk about him a lot. So we love Craig.
Yeah, well,
Cheers.
it's quite funny. He often says to me that he should get commission for every time I
Yes.
mention him in a course
Yes.
because I often tell stories about him and he goes, because his brother was in a course and, and his brother said to him, "You do get mentioned a lot."
He's a good egg. We'll hang on to him for a while. Um, Michelle, over the last, you have had an interesting journey, particularly in the last 5 years. COVID hit. You had come off, quite a few years of best-selling books. You've widely published with a number of books through Wiley. You have then COVID hit, and that was a big shift in a decision that you made in your practice and how that's led over the last 5 years. Are you happy to share a bit about that decision and what that's meant for you and your practice coming into 2025, 26?
I think, like many people, COVID created opportunities that came out of almost adversity. So, in those
Mm.
first couple of weeks when we were in lockdown, I just remember seeing cancel, 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 cancel. And you're sitting there going, wow, all my
Oh my
upcoming
God.
revenue just looks like it's been wiped out. And
Yes.
so very quickly, obviously, turned things online. And that was great, particularly, being able to do executive coaching online. You move some of their facilitation and speaking events online. I think what I noticed though, particularly in those last couple of years, executive coaching for me is equally effective online as it is in a face to
Right.
face forum. It is lovely meeting people face to face. You do get a different sort of sense of energy. There
Mm.
are lots of people who still to this day do a lot of programs and facilitations and speaking events online. I made the
Mm.
decision a couple of years ago that is not my preferred modality. I find
Right.
I get a different energy in the room when I'm with people. And
Right.
so, to the extent that I can, all of my kind of development programs and speaking engagements, they are when I'm in the room. And it means that there's work that I knock back, but I do that deliberately.
Right.
I just don't think I am at my best. What I find when I'm in this, in like one on one
Right.
like this, it's perfect.
Yes.
But I find when it's a bigger audience, particularly if it's sort of a webinar environment
Yeah.
and you can't see any reaction from people,
Yes.
you can't read a room. You can't riff
Yeah.
with the room. There's no banter. And
Yes.
I often say to people, I don't feel like I can script funny. but I'm actually my husband would dispute this, but I think I'm actually naturally funny. But
You
I'm
are
funny.
naturally funny.
I'm funny in the moment. But if
Yeah.
someone says to me, script being funny, and I'm like, oh no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So that's what I miss. I miss that
Right.
interaction that you get. And yet then I see other people who do online, and I've been in events with people that you've brought in, and they're amazing, but they've built that online environment around them. And so for me, it was a choice. And part of that is to be really good at that. There's a whole series of things that I would need to do as opposed to continuing to be really good here. And I think when you're mastering a craft, it's about making choices because it's really hard to be exceptional at
Mhm.
everything. And so
Yes.
I was making a choice to go down that path. I would have to do significantly more work. Whereas
Mm.
here, I can keep doing that and I can keep refining and developing it. But that's not something that I wanted to do.
Right. Yeah, it because it's, the technology overwhelm, the all those sorts of things. And I think you're right, is your energy and how you show up best. When you're trying to juggle, I know for me, when I originally set up the studio, it was like I had 4 cameras, there were updates going on. You had to log on 3 hours beforehand in case there were updates and all these things. And then you had to have the tech person on call in case that didn't work. And at some point, I actually have to help someone here. So you're right, is that I think that's a really valuable point, is that knowing how you best show up and how you best deliver, and it's easy to get caught up in trying to do everything, but just picking the ways that you like to deliver. And you being in Melbourne particularly is just that value of the experience of face to face. I notice when I'm in Melbourne, people really seem to really value that even more so. um,
Mm,
uh,
I
you know
agree.
you notice it compared to other states. And then you've also done things like a PhD, your article on HBR. Can you, and best-selling books, particularly widely published. What difference do you think those specific things have made to your positioning? Like prior to doing, particularly the PhD and the HBR articles, and not just HBR articles, you've ended up in the best of series books in HBR as well. What difference have those, particularly those two things, made in your practice, do you think, in terms of your positioning?
I think there's a couple of parts to it. When I left corporate, because I'd had this unusual background, and then I'm going off to, what is it that I'm doing? Are you running a consulting firm, or are you a leadership? So that, people kind of are wondering what it is that you're doing. And in those first couple of years, it took a while for me to really land on, actually, this is the space that I am playing in. This is my domain. And
Right,
what the books gave me was, one, positioning.
right,
Yes, I am an expert in this space. I've done the research, I've done the work. And then as you keep building on that with the PhD and the HBR things, it's not just the positioning externally, it's almost the internal validation. And there'd be some people who
right,
go, oh, you don't need to have the internal validation. Look at all these other things that you've done. But I do think that when you're putting yourself out there, and I see people who do this, and, you know, all courage to them, where they will claim a space and claim an expertise, but don't necessarily have some of the substance underneath it. And
right.
I've always been a bit uncomfortable with that, because my view is, as a learner, I want to be able to say I'm an expert in something, but base that up with what I feel is enough substance to go, I feel credible. So
Right.
part of it was also, yes, there's an external piece, but I do think there is that internal congruence where you go, I've done the work. I'm
Yeah.
not just calling myself an expert. I've actually done the work,
Right.
and the intellectual rigor that sits underneath that.
Yes.
And it's almost like the same intellectual rigor that I applied when I was in a corporate environment, but you're applying almost like an operational rigor. And so my sweet spot that I often say to people, or the uniqueness, is that blend of, I've got all the academic piece, all the theory and the knowledge, but it's the blending with the practical, pragmatic
Yeah.
experience of having been an executive in corporate. And when you bring those two bits together, you do create a different understanding, a deeper level of helping people see their way through this
Yes.
complex working world that we're a part of.
Yes. Yeah, I remember seeing an article about the gentleman who was came in as the CEO of Starbucks, and he came out of McKinsey, and he set the business backwards because they brought in the consultant with a PhD but had never actually been a CEO, run an organization before, and they had to remove him and go, actually, we need someone who's got the lived experience. And you're right. Is that, I think that's your message is around that pragmatic wisdom, is that, once you find that uniqueness, the unique edge is that you've got the rigor and the IP, all the thinking and all the research behind it and the academic qualifications. But it's not, you understand and have built out the theory, but you've been on the floor. You've
Yeah.
been, and so, so people going, great, it's great to have the evidence-based application of what I'm trying to learn. But then there's those going, so what do I say? I'm going to this meeting, just give me the words. Like, what exactly do I have to do? Where they just want that practical element. And I think you've done that beautifully. And that's really clear in your messaging around that pragmatic wisdom that you bring to your clients.
And I would add to that as well. I think, and we all know the benefits of storytelling because it brings things to life. And
Mm,
so when you can share a story about a time when
yes,
something was really hard, and I think also people
right,
often look at me and they go, "Oh, but you were born confident. Yeah, this would be
right.
easy for you." And I always go, "Oh, baby, this is work. This is bucket loads of work."
Right.
And I had to learn in my 20s to like myself. So
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work to really understand who I am and how I show up in the world. And so helping people understand that success is never overnight.
Right.
Progress is incremental. Progress comes with a lot of heartache sometimes, a lot of
Mm,
setbacks, but it
mm,
is that sense of just show up and do the work and
mm,
always do your best work.
right.
And that's not about, striving for perfectionism, but it is genuinely going every day doing your best work because
Yeah.
when you turn up and do something that's half-hearted, that does show through. If you don't
Yes.
want to do something with sort of purpose and meaning. And I always remember there's work from Amy Resnicki, and she talks about when people understand their purpose and can find purpose and meaning in their work, they're more
Mm,
satisfied. And she did all these studies with hospital janitors, and
yes.
at a role that most people would go, okay, how could you find satisfaction? But they were able to go, I'm helping keep patients safe because I'm
Yes.
keeping the hospital clean. And by
Yeah.
connecting with that higher purpose, they were more satisfied and therefore enjoyed their work more. So if we can connect to that purpose, it's so powerful, so powerful.
Right. Yeah, and I think in this type of work, that is a big part of this work that keeps people going. You look at thought leaders like we were talking about Jane Goodall recently. She was about to go on stage on her last keynote when she passed away, or wasn't even necessarily her last keynote. I think she would have kept going and she not passed away the night before going on stage at 91.
Yeah,
Um,
wow.
which is incredible. For us as women, we're living longer. This is almost a version of 2.0 as launching a thought leadership practice. Is that it's a leveling up of a new identity, stepping into your own light, putting yourself out there. What advice would you have for others who are perhaps either on this journey or looking at doing this journey about how do you overcome putting yourself out there, like, that whole vulnerability of going, have I actually got something valid to say? Hasn't it all been said before? I don't have a PhD. What advice would you have for those who are going, oh my God, that just I want to do it, but I just don't know if I've got it in me.
I always remember the title of the Susan Jeffries book, Feel the Fear and Do It
Right.
Anyway. And
Yeah,
I
okay.
remember when I wrote my first book and the publisher said to me, signed off, it's just about to go to the printers. And she said, "How are you feeling? You must feel really excited." And I said, "I feel like I'm going to vomit." And she goes,
Right.
she goes, "Okay." She goes, "Haven't had that before."
Right.
And I said, "I am just waiting for all those people that I worked with in corporate to judge me, to say, who does she think she is? Well,
Right.
she's an author now. So I was really, with that first book, really nervous. I wrote it, then didn't want to tell anybody that I wrote it. And
Okay.
then it was once again Craig who said, well, that's kind of nuts. You've just spent all this time and money writing a book and you don't want to tell anybody. And so I learned that the fear was going to be there.
Right.
The fear was my friend.
Okay.
And it just told me that this mattered to me and
Right.
just do it and move through it. And so, and every time I did it, it got easier. So when I did the second book, I was like, oh, yeah, been here. And I didn't have
Right.
the same sense of fear because
Okay.
I'd had that experience. And actually, when I did the first book, well, who knows? Maybe some people did say, who did she think she is? But it's not as though they said it to my face. So it didn't
Right.
matter. And
Right.
so it was, we tell ourselves stories all the time. And it was just going, actually, some of those stories that I'm telling myself, that just doesn't matter. I have to
Yeah.
be clear about why I'm doing this, why the
Right.
work matters, and just keep doing it. And also break things down into incremental pieces. And I remember very early in starting the business, a gentleman who had run many, many successful businesses for many years said to me, you need to find ways to reward yourself. And I said, why? He said, because when you work for yourself, Michelle, no one's going to reward you. Yes, you might get a
Exactly.
client who says, hey, well done. Or the client telling you that you've done a good job is the fact that they've signed on for that next piece of work. But it's not like in corporate where there's a reward and recognition scheme or you get a bonus or that. He
That's
said,
right.
so what are those milestones that you build into your working rhythm where you
Yeah.
stop and pause and you self-reflect and go, yeah, I'm really I'm really happy with where I've
Right.
landed. And actually that was a really good piece of work.
Right.
So breaking the work down so that you can see progress and
Yeah.
then rewarding yourself for that progress.
Right. Yeah, so true. We've just come off at the back of our Celebrate and Elevate Day with the community. And I know for my dad celebrates the opening of an envelope, and it's been a great habit to have because you're right. You have to find those wins and you have to find those ways, don't you, to go, you know what? That's pretty good. And what do you think the value of having a community around you has had with those sorts of celebrations and wins? And because you're right, this is a lonely game.
It is. And I think having people that you can go to is so important.
Right.
And I think it's the validation. So when you're in a room with an amazing group of women and they're sharing similar stories, or if you've been there and been where they're now at, and you can say, hey, you'll get through it. I've been there. I know what it's like.
Yeah.
It's validating and it's
Right.
comforting because you don't feel quite so alone. And also, it's like the wisdom of the crowd. Lots of people have different ideas, and then it's you as your own sort of business person can then work out what to do with those ideas. But it is
Yes.
good because you learn from others, and you can be, it's easy to be in your own little echo chamber, but to hear what other people are doing, it also helps you stay current because
Right.
businesses keep moving, everything
Yeah.
keeps changing. And that's one of the
Right.
things that I've really valued, being part of your community, is the ideas that you bring in to keep all of us up to date with how things are moving and changing,
Right.
particularly in the AI world, so that we're
Mm,
ahead of the game, not playing catch up.
right. Yeah, it's hard because you're trying to stay focused on your expertise and build that out, and it's hard to know what to pay attention to, isn't it? Like there's a
Mm.
lot of noise and going, I don't know, do I need to pay attention to that? Do I not? Like, so you sort of need that filter a little bit sometimes, don't you?
You do. And I also think it's very easy to play the comparison game. And I
Yeah, right.
always remember this. I do a lot of executive coaching work, and a
Yeah,
lady who I used to coach many years ago used to always say, my race, my pace.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's such a great saying
yeah.
because she goes, I know where I'm going and I'm going to get there at the pace I need to. I have children, I'm managing this, I'm managing that. But it's a great thing to have in the back of your mind because it is about you making, as a business owner, but even as a human in relationships, and what choices are you making that are setting you up for where you're wanting to get
Mm,
to long term. And I think that's for me where Craig comes in. We are a real partnership. One thing we do
yeah,
we have done it every wedding anniversary for the last 22 years. And I remember the first time I did it, Craig was like, "You are bringing out a spreadsheet on our wedding anniversary? Whoa, hello, romance." Um, but we have a spreadsheet and it's a nice way of keeping track. And we have goals and they're personal goals. So there's individual and there's collective goals, and we have them
Right.
against different categories. So there's learning, there's financial stuff, there's spiritual, there's social, there's adventures, and we map the things that we want to do that next year. And we also reflect on what we've done this year. And part of that is recognizing, I've always said, I am an individual who is in an amazing relationship, but I am an individual first before I am a couple. And that's
Yes.
always been an important part of my identity, but
Right.
also Craig's identity. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're really successful as a couple is because we choose to be together. We don't have to be together.
Yes.
And we are both very values driven. And so what that process does is just that check every year. And we have never worked our wedding anniversary. We always
Right.
take that day off.
Okay.
It's our day to talk about how are we going as a couple and are we
Right.
individually and collectively on track?
Right.
And it's really nice.
Yeah.
And you put fun things in. You go, oh, next year we're going to do this. And actually, and then we have like in 5 years, we want to go to Prague or we want to go here or we haven't go there. And it's about us going, who are we and what type of life do we want to live and
Mm.
contribute?
Yeah. I love the intentionality of that because it's so easy, to just be on the treadmill and just going and being able to stop. Um, because this type of business is so it's such an integrated part of your life. We don't turn up, go to work, get on the train, come back home. We don't have a lot of segmentation. And not saying you wouldn't do that if you had your job anyway, but this time, there's a lot of work-life integration that goes on with this
Agreed.
type of world, isn't it? It's a little bit different. So taking that time to be intentional, what is it? And still the respect for their space and each other's space. Because, let's face it, the reason why we went into this was to have, the self-expression, the achievement of the goals you want to achieve, the freedom, fulfillment, and fun that you want to do. And we as much as it's a solo practice, it's certainly not a solo game in terms of the people we need around us to make all that happen.
Agreed.
Um, and then my last question to you, Michelle. Actually, I have two last questions. Second last one is: so, what are your goals? What is your vision? What's next for you? You've achieved so much. Are you sitting back on the, out in the pool with the daiquiri, going, "Come and talk to me. What do you need? Like, I've done it all." I feel like you're just warming up. Like, what could possibly be happening next for you?
Well, I'm currently addicted to Pilates.
Oh,
Um,
right. Okay.
I feel like I'm sort of late to the party because everyone's like, "Oh,
Okay.
yeah, reformer Pilates, Michelle, that's been around forever."
Uh,
Um, and part of that is also just coming off the PhD. The
yes.
PhD finished at the end of last year. I'm so
Mhm.
glad I did it, but it really was like you had this nail in the back of your head. And so part of
Right.
this year was, wow, the nail's gone. Oh, gee, oh my God, Holly, look at it, I can think again. So there was a much sort of almost like a release of creative juices. And so
Okay.
part of this year has been a decluttering process of just reflection, clear the decks, focus on things, and focus sort of in the business in terms of some of the things that I needed to tidy up. Is there more on the horizon? Absolutely. I think part of that is also just in my DNA. I love
Yeah.
learning. I love being challenged. Every year there is something that I will want to do that is expanding my knowledge base, but also expanding my ability to be able to work with the people that I work with.
Mm.
Some of that is a reflection process over Christmas, where I will
Right.
have some quiet time to go, what do I really want to do in 2026? But
Mm.
there's no major things in my life that I want to change. I often think, I've worked very deliberately to be where I am and
Yes.
I love my life. Craig and I have this question that we often ask ourselves, where if we're thinking about doing something, we'll say, if we do this, will it overly complicate our life? And
Right.
if the answer to that is yes, then we have to really deeply go, then is that the choice we want to make?
Right.
We're a
I love it.
very we're very contented, um, but I often say to people, I don't drive a flash car. I don't live in a mansion or anything like that. But we have made some very sort of sensible choices about the life that we want. And it's
Mm,
very easy back onto that treadmill to run
mm,
and chase the next thing because you want the bigger this or the bigger that. But that doesn't necessarily make you any happier. And
right.
so for me, the contentment is I genuinely love the work that I do. I love
Yeah.
the people that I get to work with. And I'm also now in that position that, and this sounds really arrogant, but if I don't like you, I don't have to work with you.
Yeah. It's so nice to be at that point, isn't it? That's a blessing.
But I would say it's very rare that you come across someone that you go, yeah, no. But also sometimes it's also the nature of the work where you actually, I just don't think I'm best suited to that type of environment or the type of work that you want to do. And
Mm.
so for me, I look at 26, it's lots of learning, it's lots of travel, lots of Pilates. I would
Yes.
like to get back to playing the piano. I haven't played the piano in a few years and I would like to get back to that. Lots
Yes.
of adventures and lots of just doing great work with
Yeah.
amazing people.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Michelle, we are cheering you on, and for what you've achieved today is extraordinary, and to see the work that you're doing is really powerful. The IP, the ideas you're unpacking, it's like your thought leadership is just going to a whole new level at the moment with diagnostics and the IP and just the leveling up. The work I'm seeing you do in the background is just incredible. Um, for those who want to connect with you, and I particularly love this, I've learned so much from you today, the power of a team in having the right people around you. Um, I think the other thing for you in your practice is I love that you play your own game. You do what's right for you. I think that's a big thing that you've always really stuck with, is that whilst there's a journey and whilst there's frameworks and structure in terms of building a thought leadership practice, is you've done it the way that's right for you. And so I've always really admired that about you. And I think you're a great example of, no, here's what I like to do. You're doing great work with clients, not just in Australia, but around the world. You've been up since crazy o'clock with because your time zone is often working with American time zone, with US clients, working with people around the world. And I'm also taking away around what is enough, like as in what's enough for you, your life, what is sustainable as well, in terms of, because this is a lot of work that you're doing for, this is your life's work. We can see that in what you're doing. And I love this question that you finished on, which is the question you and Craig asked, is if we do this, will it overcomplicate our life? I think that's such a great question because more things means more problems. And being able to go, actually, less is sometimes more. What did Coco Chanel say? The before going out, take one thing off. And it's the same thing in our businesses and our practices as well. For those who want to follow you, connect with you, Michelle, where are they best to go? What would you recommend they do?
I'm across all the platforms except TikTok, which means that's probably showing my age, but I'm, LinkedIn, Instagram, but it's also probably best just to go straight to my website, which is michellegibbings.com.
All right. Terrific. Well, thank you very much for sharing all your wisdom today. Make sure for those listening, jump on. You've got to follow Michelle. She is a leader in her space and leading the way in terms of workplace complexity, influence, leadership, and change. And so I'd highly recommend following Michelle in terms of to see someone who's playing the game the way they want to play it. Thank you again for joining us, Michelle. We can't wait to see what you do next, and we're all cheering you on. I hope you just remember us all. You're already famous. I was going to say, remember us when you're famous. You're already famous. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jane. It's been lots of fun. Thank you.
My pleasure.